It dawned on me the other day, I have done an awful lot of testing, I've played with an awful lot of gear. It really doesn't make sense for me to not share some of these experiences with the YouTube audience at large. So this is the first video I'm going to be doing. What's it on? Well, if you read the title, which hopefully you did, it's on a Panasonic GH5. So what was I upgrading from? I had been using a Samsung NX1 for about a year, and I was perfectly happy with it, but I did see an awful lot of enticing features on the GH5, especially for a $2,000 body, which is pretty cheap. I know most of us would all like to go get a Sony a7R or something like that, but it's not always in the budget, and sometimes the versatility of a lens system is more than enough to sway a person. Being able to pick from all of the Micro Four Thirds lenses and get adapters to pick from any of the Canon or Nikon lenses made a huge impact on what camera I chose. Now keep in mind, this is my first Panasonic, so I'm certainly not experienced, and I'm just getting used to the way that they have decided to lay out all of their menus, because holy moly did they give you a lot of menu options. So let's take a look, and of course I'll show you plenty of results too. Some of the finished product that I've shot in the last week, and just some stuff I've done playing around with testing. So yeah, sit back and enjoy.
So when the GH5 showed up, I got it from Ritz Camera. Came with a memory card, a monopod, and a bag. Nothing too fancy. But then of course there was the GH5. I unboxed it at work, took a look at it. Number of accessories you could get for it, pretty impressive. A manual, which I very quickly discarded. Alright, digging in deeper, I found the camera itself, of course. A neck strap, branded GH5 Lumix. Power cable. The HDMI coupler. This thing was designed to hold the HDMI cable in place. And then, of course, the camera body, which was actually pretty cute. Very small. Taking a look at the camera body, it's really not too dissimilar from a normal camera. Touchscreen is reliable, although I don't know what the hell half the functions and buttons actually do. There's also 5 different function buttons on the camera body. And loads of menu options. It does have a nice pop-up that tells you what each one is supposed to do, although sometimes even then the terminology is a bit lost on me. All the buttons are laid out very tidily on top and are easily within reach of your fingers when you're holding the camera body. The front dial adjusts aperture, the wireless indicators on the back, white balance, ISO, exposure, and function 1 are all on the top. There's a very small mechanical flash plug on the front with a little screw. The sides have access to the HDMI and USB compartments, as well as headphones and mic jack. However, now that I've opened them a couple of times, they're very easy to flip open accidentally. USB-C, HDMI, and 2 screws to hold the HDMI bracket. Up top is the mic input, which is a little strange. You'll notice that when you start actually moving the screen through its rotation, it's going to block the HDMI and it's going to block the USB, and it might bonk into the headphones. On top, you'll find the onboard stereo mics and a fairly advanced hot shoe adapter, which can hold the XLR input that Panasonic makes. The screen is crazy smudgeable. In direct sunlight, you'll see exactly how smudgy the touchscreen has become, and it gets pretty nasty. The autofocus modes are set on a dial in the back: manual focus, autofocus continuous, and autofocus single. Focus selection can either take place with your touch or with a little D-pad that's built in. A sturdy latch holds the battery in place. The SD card slot door is very firm, revealing the 2 SD card slots. I did find in movie mode that the exposure preview is automatic, whereas in manual mode or any of the other standard photo modes, it was not. However, you can change that in the settings menu. But enough about the camera body. I took it out and immediately got started shooting with a Sigma 30mm that a friend of mine lent me. color was incredibly vibrant, and everything just looked so effortless. I took it out the other day with my dad and his pup and got some really nice detail shots of fur on his dog. I also tried out an Olympus 9mm fisheye lens that I bought. It does not include optical image stabilization, which you can kind of tell as I walk around. But at $99, you can't expect a hell of a lot more. I also had purchased an Olympus 40 to 150mm pen lens, just to see what a zoom would do on it, but once again it did not have optical image stabilization because this was an Olympus. I found it to be a little bit too shaky to reliably use, so I ended up returning it. Then I switched back over to my 12 to 35 Vario lens for a little bit of walking work to see what the onboard stabilizer was capable of doing, and frankly, it looks very smooth. Just holding this thing with two hands and walking carefully, I was able to get near gimbal-like stability. Of course, there's some footfalls here and there, but if I had run this through Warp Stabilizer or maybe Prodad Mercalli, I'd have some very smooth stuff. The other weekend I also took it up to Honda Fest for my other channel, Minute Rice channel. I found myself shooting a lot of cars in 4K at 60 frames per second. Slowing it down to 30, it was incredibly smooth on a Ronin M. I did, however, discover that I'm going to need some faster cards because 150 megs per second is an awful lot. My U3 Samsungs were just not quite cutting it, so I'm going to have to upgrade cards pretty soon here. I was seeing frames dropped here and there, and in general some stuttering.
Okay, so obviously this is very dark, shitty cell phone footage. I'm going to show you what this can see instead. Why don't you go ahead and look down there with me. This is a Galaxy S6 that's recording versus what the GH5 is capable of seeing. So, turn it back up to 60. Start stepping ISO down, 12,800, 6,400, 3,200, 1,600, 800, 400, 200.
After my low light test, I decided to just walk around and see what I could see at night with it. All in all, there is definitely noise in the shadows above about 3,200 ISO. I suppose I could probably correct it in After Effects, but in general, it's not exactly distracting. The grain, while it's present and noticeable, is very fine, and I think would take well to correction. Of course, in low light, you will discover that the contrast isn't quite as good, meaning that the autofocus is going to struggle a little bit, like right here, and right here. I had to find an area of high contrast in order to get this thing to lock on. And then everything seemed fine. I had also found it was a bit of a bother on the Sigma 30mm that my friend had lent me. Trying to get it to do a gentle, logical transition between the center of the frame and the new center of the frame was proving difficult. Tapping on it, I could easily get it to fall, but it wasn't really doing it on its own. even when I was trying to transition